All right, hey Brandon.
How's it going, Brian?
It's going well. How are you, man?
Doing very well.
So we're here to answer some of the questions that the folks at Brand New on Twitter and SportsLogos.net have asked us regarding the Open Project. So I
That's
think you
right.
have, you have those written down, and the first one that we got was the series of unfortunate sketches, a joke.
They were not a joke. That was a real attempt at interlocking an N and a Z together and creating a monogram, um, which if you think of like the Under Armour symbol, the Under Armour symbol is an X, but it's a U and an A that makes the X. It creates something new. So when you turn a Z sideways or an N sideways and you lock them together, uh, they create some unfortunate symbolism. But it was a real attempt at trying to make something that worked. Um, but I thought it would be good to show, because it's like if we put those out and we show everybody that this happened, then it feels like, well, we're not holding anything back, and we truly are showing an open project here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like to me you were going for that kind of LA Dodgers kind of ligature style mark with the N and Z, and I think you said it when you combine them the way that you did. It's an unfortunate combination, but
Yeah.
for everybody listening out there, I am Jewish, so that's certainly something that I wouldn't have felt comfortable with, and I know Brandon, you're not an insensitive guy, so that's not something you would have done on purpose. So, no,
No.
definitely not a joke. Just something that we were slapping on, noodles against the wall and seeing what might stick, and that's certainly something that's not sticking.
Yeah, and it's part of the process of getting bad ideas out first, of getting the simple ideas. I mean, you start with the simplest N, the simplest Z, and then you start
Correct.
putting those puzzle pieces together. And it's just good to get the easy ideas, the cheap ideas out first, and it forces you to push deeper and find something that does work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had some other sketches too. While not unfortunate, that I think were definitely things that I wasn't thinking of. That were a little bit more baseball on the nose. So, that script New Zealand and the fern that goes across the chest of the jersey, and those may be solutions that we come back to because they're appropriate. But I also think that that initial rush of excitement brought about wanting to just dive in there with no real direction or information. So that happens, and it's like you said, getting the easy ideas, the bad ideas, the on the nose ideas out of the way, so that you can go to the deeper stuff is a good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, what's the next question?
Next one. Will you be using the public to help guide the design process, or is this project purely to communicate the thought behind the design process?
Um, I definitely think that's more of the latter. We intended to really invite this as more of a behind the scenes, see how the sausage is made kind of a project in that respect. So we're not really looking to the public to drive the creative direction, so to speak. But I don't know that we're only two human beings, and there's going to be somebody out there who may have a clever idea or will be able to share something with us that we haven't thought of or haven't seen, and we may incorporate that if we feel it's appropriate. But for the most part, I don't think we're going to look to the public for creative input.
No, the original idea was to kind of put glass walls on the studio and to peek inside. But yeah, of course, if we overlook something and someone shows us something that makes sense, then of course you have to listen. Um, a good example of that might be Fraser Davidson tweeted us the 1974 Commonwealth Games logo, which was a NZ lockup and kind of played off of the New Zealand flag as well. And I had never seen that logo before. So I added it to an inspiration folder for this project. So that's an example of where the public can play into it, like anybody can play into it. But yeah, it's not designed by committee.
No. Well, if there is a committee, it's going to be the folks at Baseball New Zealand, not the public.
Yeah. Right on.
What's next? Let's see here.
What challenges arise for designing for an overseas organization?
I mean, you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, it's the time zones. You and I are 3 time zones separate,
Yeah.
and New Zealand is on the other side of the world. So it presents a challenge for us to talk,
Hmm.
uh, but it has kind of worked out so far pretty well, because when I get home from work, then you're still in your day, and then it's the afternoon in New Zealand, I think.
Yeah.
So we've got a pretty good window to work with.
Yeah. I think that's the big one. I mean, for those of you watching who don't know, Brandon lives in Miami, Florida, and I live in Portland, Oregon. So we even as the designers are 3 hours apart from each other. So we have to coordinate our schedules even just to have conversations like this. And then you add, the guys over in Auckland who are, I think it's 21 hours ahead of us or something like that. So it's actually tomorrow in New Zealand when we're talking to them. That was a little tricky to get used to, just remembering that they're a day ahead. So our Friday is their Saturday. So we have to make sure we're delivering concepts and decks and things a day early. So I think that's the logistics of that is kind of the biggest hurdle.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I think the other big thing for us is that obviously we're American, and we're working with an organization that represents an entire other nation. And while we understand the sporting side of the brand part of it, we're obviously we understand baseball, we understand sports, we understand sports branding. We don't understand New Zealand. So that I think is going to be something that for us we need to kind of basically get a crash course in New Zealand culture and history and everything that's important to the people over there to make sure that we do this right.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also part of the intriguing thing about this project, because we knew, or we felt early on, that this could be an opportunity to do something really cool, really unique, work
Mm-hmm.
with different kind of art style, and pull some inspiration for it, so that it's both exciting, it's both, we don't know quite what we're getting into, but that's part of the design process for me too. It's why I take on projects like this, is to learn new things and to get to do something that I not normally would do.
Yeah, I think there's such a rich cultural heritage with New Zealand that we're going to get to be able to explore. We're being given the opportunity to speak with Professor of Maori Visual Culture and History, I think is what he actually teaches. And he's going to be a really good resource for us to be able to learn authentically, because I mean anybody can do a Google search and we can pull from Moana stills and all the stuff that's all black tattoos and all that stuff, but how much of that is authentic to New Zealand, and so to be able to have that direct source is going to be something that's going to be really fun, and I think really valuable for us, and to help our work be more authentic and hit home.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. When designing for a New Zealand sporting body for an American sport, what role or influence do national brand identities play in the design process?
We're not sure yet, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. One of the things we've discussed leading up to this is, and we'll have to do a much deeper dive into this, but it's kind of figuring out what this black, white, and silver fern imagery means to New Zealand. Is it something where it's like every sporting body that uses it is just a copy of the All Blacks, or is there something there that's tied in historically and really strong, really meaningful to New Zealand culture? Something like you see with Australia and their sporting bodies, their sporting teams wearing gold and green.
Yeah. We had a lot of people when we first announced the project on Twitter and on Facebook and through sportslogos.net mentioned to us that we needed to include the silver fern. And, we heard that a lot over and over and over again. And we had a really interesting email exchange with Ryan Flynn, the CEO of Baseball New Zealand, who told us flat out that he wanted to shy away from that. Besides, I think you mentioned all the copycats of the All Blacks, which for those of you who don't know, it's the national rugby team in New Zealand, one of the most famous and successful sporting organizations of all times. But there's a lot of copycats of that, and then on top of it, fast pitch softball, which has been developed more intensely and successfully over the years than baseball has been in the country, uses silver fern on the cap. So for him, he wants to distinguish Baseball New Zealand away from fast pitch softball and from the other copycat organizations. So he directed us to look elsewhere. So for us, I think it's going to be important to either find those solutions or push back on that, and we need to be able to find that middle ground.
Yeah, it's tough to have a definitive answer right now, because it's kind of like it. Are we doing something that is a copycat, or are we doing something that's meaningful, that's really part of the New Zealand brand and not just the All Blacks brand? So that's part of the research. That's part of the next couple of conversations we'll have with Baseball New Zealand, is trying to kind of figure out the authenticity of all that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll be curious to see how we end up on that.
Yeah, same here. Okay. This one I'm naming Question of the Week. This one comes from our friend Gareth Hooton. What is the process to clearly identifying and combining the core values and the essence of the national brand, the sports brand, the client, and then turning all of that into a material symbol? And that is logo design. That is identity design. The process of doing that, it kind of changes from project to project, because design isn't a recipe. And you can have a good process in place, but at some point you need a spark, you need an idea. You're always looking for something that communicates well, that makes sense from a strategic standpoint. Like, does the silver fern make sense for them or not? Is it going to be lost in the crowd, or is it something that's really meaningful? And you're just looking for a couple of ideas that can be combined together and communicate something that is meaningful.
Yeah. I think you kind of said it really well just then, and I'd like to add that what we have going for us is the fact that you and I, as we mentioned earlier, we understand the sports branding side of it. We understand the baseball side of it. So we can come at this from an American style, professional Major League Baseball franchise style brand. What we also have going for us is the fact that Baseball New Zealand themselves are really interested in making sure that we get the New Zealand part of that right, so that we're not just a couple of Yankees coming in and saying this is what the American brand would look like, and there you go. And having resources like that professor of Maori culture and visual arts is going to be so important for us to lean on, to be able to take all of that experience and get those ideas that you're talking about and distill it into the brand.
Yeah, and distilling it into the brand, that's the key thing. Because I don't think you'll see everything that we want to communicate put into a single logo.
No.
Or the typeface. It's going to be everything together, the entire identity, will express probably different things about New Zealand, about baseball in New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point. That the brand is not just the logos. It's not just the cap. It's not just the lettering. It's our graphics package. It's our pattern work. It's our apparel designs. It's how we all combine that together. That really we can take pieces of that and make all of that work together as a whole.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I'm really excited about, and I think will drive a lot of that, is all the research that we do. I think that's something that you in particular, Brandon, are really, really good at, is doing that deep dive research. And I've seen that from you in pretty much every project you do. So that'll be exciting for us.
Well, I know you have some background with Nike too. I spent a year with J America designing Ohio State apparel, doing research on Ohio State football almost every day. And when was it? I think it was 2 years ago, Nike comes out with the throwback Ohio State uniforms, and they pull this phrase out of who knows where they got it from, but it was cannon fire and music and cannon fire, or something like that. And I know you've got that Nike research kind of instilled in you, so I'm very impressed by what Nike has been able to do, and so having that in your background, that's I know we're going to be all right.
Yeah, I think between the two of us, that's to me, that's the exciting part, is when you can find those little nuggets of the unknown history, and a lot of that's going to come down to what we're able to learn from the organization itself. And as much as I would love to, if we could do a research trip, maybe we'll start a GoFundMe for Brandon and Brian's New Zealand research trip. But I think that would have added that much more. I still think we'll be able to get a lot just from our connections over there. But, that's those, when you can have those nuanced pieces, I think it adds that much more. And I see a lot of that in your work too. So, and like a lot of the stuff, I think, the collateral pieces, especially too, where you can pull from other areas outside of sports and inject that, keeps it really fresh. I see you do that with your Dolphin stuff all the time. And I think that's what's going to make this brand contemporary, fresh, and exciting.
Yeah. All right, buddy. I think we're good.
All right. So, if you want to engage with us and ask questions for next week or the next Q&A section, which is 3 weeks from now, yes. Tweet at us with the hashtag OpenBaseballNZ. Follow along. Yes, hashtag OpenBaseballNZ. Follow along at sportslogos.net and at BrandMoreArt and at B Gundel.
All right, buddy.
All right. Talk to you later, man.
See ya.